Active. Infallible. Filoserve notice. The following document was inserted into this file at a later date, under Containment Protocol Herodotus. Refer to Special Containment Procedures for more information. Verse 106-109. As witnessed by Raplatere, 5th Rajmata of the Scarlet Maharaja. And once the beast had laid waste to Amoni Ram, torn the city asunder and set the armies loose to tear each other apart, it continued its dreadful march across the desert and into the jungles and forests of the Covenant. And in this it was victorious, for it had slaughtered the grand armies at Amoni Ram, rooting the men and spirits of the Deva from the battlefield, sending them into a desperate retreat through the thickets and undergrowth, to MAMJUL, to salvation. And so it was that the armies of the Deva were forced to abandon their peoples, their sacred charge and those of their children, as they formed a great mass, marching ceaselessly towards their stronghold, the ancestral home of the Deva, where they could mount a defense. But as with all things, such decisions are rooted in sacrifices of blood, of honor, of duty. And the ultimate sacrifice was made 100 times over. Loyal soldiers left to their devices against the chaos of the horde, knowing their deaths inevitable, taking solace in the fact that their deaths might preserve their afterlives. Because it was understood that were the Blackster to lead his armies across the isthmus and into MAMJUL, he would lay siege to the city, and break it just as he had broken Amoni Ram. The slaughter would be wholesale and complete, and not only of the material plane. For were the three-prong army to bring down the walls of MAMJUL, to seize the tree, they would tear apart the roots seeking the original gift of the Scarlet, the source of the Maharaja's power. And should they take it from his sleeping corpse, he would crumble away to nothingness, robbed of his immortality. And as he crumbled, so too would the dream he dreamt, and KORAR with it. Section 1.7. Later research. On the 11th of April, following several months of cooperative research from all teams of the MAMJUL KORAR initiative, the first revision of the Devic Empire cultural briefing was finalized. The report covered nearly every aspect of cultural knowledge that the Deva had been willing to share with Foundation personnel, and represented likely the first written record of the Deva's existence in centuries, perhaps millennia. A meeting of the Anthropology Committee was called to discuss forward action. Addendum. Attached document, April 2003. In attendance: Dr. Pandora Galanus, Project Lead led. Operator R.J. Desai, Dive Team led Dive. Senior Researcher Levi Sheridan, Archaeology Team led Arch. Senior Researcher Xing Yijin, Linguistic Analysis Team led Ling. Dr. Carl Abera, Anthropology Team led Anth. Senior Researcher Vijay Ramaswamy, Parahistory Team led Hist. Begin log. Galanus and Desai enter the conference room aboard the Phantom. The research committee is already assembled and waiting. The leads are seated around the conference table, while sub-team leads and senior researchers crowd the walls. Galanus: hello again, everyone. Big day today, huh? Sheridan: Arch: morning, boss. Yijin: Ling: well? Don't leave us in suspense. Galanus smiles. Galanus: MHM. After 6 months, several hundred interviews with the Deva, and thousands of hours of research and cultural study by every member of the initiative, I've transmitted the final draft of the cultural briefing, all 954 pages of it, to Overwatch Command as of 8:02 this morning. The room bursts into cheers and claps. Several researchers high-five, hug or simply whistle. The celebration carries on for the better part of a minute, until Galanus raises their hand and it dies down. Galanus: I know not everyone's here, but for those of you that are, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You guys did an amazing job. None of us knew what we were getting into when we made the first dive into MAMJUL, but you've all handled the impossible job with an exceptional air of professionalism and duty. It's you guys that made this possible. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Another, more reserved round of applause rings out from the researchers lined up around the room. Gallinus, this is a huge milestone, but our work isn't over yet. The briefing is a pretty exhaustive look at the culture and anthropology of the diva, but our historians still have a lot of work ahead of us. Additionally, I was informed by the council that we'll be seeing some new faces within the week. A crew of researchers from the Applied Thaumaturgy Division are being flown out. Desai, dive, we're getting wizards. A polite chuckle rings out. Gallinus, I think they're technically mages, but yeah. The council has a lot of interest in seeing the applications of Devic thaumaturgy, so that's a new avenue of research. But the rest of us also have a lot to do, especially our parahistory team. You'll all get briefings from your team leads with your new research directives by the end of the day. For now, you're dismissed, everyone. Enjoy the day off. The researchers cheer one last time before trickling out of the conference room. Eventually, just the team leads and Gallinus are left. Sheridan takes off his glasses and rubs his eyes. Sheridan Arch, can't believe it's really finished. Abara, Anth, feels a bit like seeing your kid off to college, haha. Yijin, Ling, I'm relieved, honestly. Gallinus, yeah? How so? Yijin, Ling, if I never talk to a diva again it'll be too soon. Gallinus looks at her askance. Gallinus, what do you mean? Sheridan Arch, I mean, you know what she's talking about. Gallinus, I really don't. Abara, Anth, neither do I. Sheridan Arch, come on, you guys read the same culture briefing I did. I mean, hell, we wrote it. The diva aren't exactly a squeaky clean culture. Abara, Anth, such a thing doesn't exist. Yijin, Ling, sure, but like, you guys didn't find it weird or creepy when these huge creatures started talking about sacrificing their slaves? Ramaswamy hissed. It was not enjoyable, but one needs to keep an open mind about such things. They are from 3,000 years ago. Slavery and sacrifice being taboo are modern luxuries. Abara, Anth, such things were ubiquitous in the ancient world. Sheridan Arch, yeah, but we're not in the ancient world, are we? Abara, Anth, the diva are. Sheridan Arch, you guys seriously don't see anything fucked up about this? I wrote the section where we talk about finding the sacrifice pits in MAMJUL. They were a brutal, militaristic culture. Yijin, Ling, yeah. Just because they existed back then doesn't mean they are exempt from judgment. Ramaswamy hissed. 400,000 people died in the construction of the Great Wall of China. Countless thousands of slaves in the construction of the pyramids. We cannot apply our modern moral axioms to the actions of kings from 1,000 years before democracy was even thought of. Sheridan Arch, even if that was true, you still have to face the fact that they did awful things. Like, boss, the Rajmata showed you the atrocities during the war. Gallinus, I mean, yes, but those were mutual atrocities. The first war was rife with them from all sides. Yijin, Ling, that doesn't mean that they are not guilty of doing terrible things. Ramaswamy hissed, as though we're any different. Consider how many people die in pointless resource wars or terrorism or senseless acts of violence every day. Sheridan Arch, dude, are you serious? Yeah, I think our culture is a little better than the people sacrificing kids to the blood god. Abara, Anth, are you trying to be reductive? Yijin, Ling, I don't totally agree with Levi, but like, you guys do recognize what you're excusing, right? Their morals haven't changed. I bet if you went in and asked any one of them right now, they'd still tell you that enslaving lesser creatures is okay. Abara, Anth. We're approaching this from an anthropological perspective. Just because I find some things morally reprehensible doesn't mean I get to cast judgment over an entire culture. That's no basis for scholarly research. Galenus raises their hands. Galenus, okay, look, everyone, I think we may have gotten a little too close to the subject of the research here. Ramaswamy hissed, I do not believe getting close to the subject is always bad. Your close relationship with the Rajmata is the only way we have learned so much about the Diva to begin with. Galenus, yeah, you're right, but our work requires a little distance to be able to remain impartial. Yijin, Ling, the Devic language has 40 different words for religious torture. We've spent the better part of a year studying these things. Are you really telling me the image you've gotten isn't one of a brutal theocracy? How can you be impartial about that? Galenus, look, I'm not saying that either. I think this has gotten a little heated. Abara, Anth. Then what are you saying, Doctor? Sheridan Arch, whose side are you even on? Galenus, Desai, dive, back the fuck off. Silence. Desai, dive, I'm serious. Talk like that to them again and I'll break your nose. Silence. Sheridan Arch, quietly, sorry, boss. Desai, dive, that's what I thought. You guys are all only here because Pan stuck up for you to the council, or all of your asses would have been behind desks months ago. Show a little goddamn respect. Galenus raises a hand. Galenus, it's alright. It's an emotional day. People are high-strung. It's okay. You guys are dismissed. You'll get your research directives on your terminals. The team leads quietly file out of the room, avoiding eye contact with each other. Desai and Galenus are left. Desai, dive, you okay? Galenus, yeah. They sigh. Galenus, no. Not really. End log. Attached document, April 2003. From the desk of Dr. Pandora Galenus. MAMJUL KORAR Initiative. Personal thoughts on research progress. Well, today was shitty. I didn't realize there was this kind of an ideological split among the leads. It's jarring. I don't know how to feel about it. On one hand, Carl and Vijay are right. The one thing they hammer into you throughout your undergrad, graduate school, doctoral work, your career, is that trying to apply modern moral conceptions to ancient cultures is foolish. That's how ethnocentrism starts. Our modern morals are a product of an exceptionally high quality of life, wealth, and lifespan. The Diva didn't have that. Like almost all ancient empires, their culture was built off the back of a gargantuan apparatus of slavery, imperialism, and state violence. But at the same time, it's a unique situation, right? The Diva aren't ancient. Well, they are, but they're not extinct. It's not like you're talking about the Egyptian slavery system, where everyone involved has been dead for thousands of years. The Diva still exist, and Yijin is right. They still hold these beliefs. The Rajmata certainly does. Everything is a matter of perspective. Whether the Diva are a product of their time or a warlike empire, maybe both. It's more complicated than that. It's so complicated. I think we might have gotten a little close to the subject of research here. We had to immerse ourselves in the culture to learn what we did, but I'm not sure we've learned what immersing ourselves has done to our own perspectives. Not to mention the fact that we still need to figure out what happened to the Covenant after Amoni Ram fell. This new stuff about the three-prong army and the abominate wretch and the Blackster. I'm looking through all our databases and plenty of mundane academic ones. I've come up entirely dry. Except for one thing. Vijay caught it. The mortuary temple of Rameses III. The basis for the mythology of the Sea Peoples. An unidentified culture group that swept through and laid waste to Asia Minor, Egypt, and the rest of the Mediterranean during the Bronze Age collapse. We have no records of who they were or how they managed to annihilate a slew of powerful military states, just some Egyptian writings that prove their presence in the region. But the Rajmata mentioned the wretch had crawled out of the sea and quietly built an army that proceeded to steamroll over every other culture on its way to Amoni Ram. Writings in Amoni Ram and the Rajmata's testimony indicate that the three-prong army came out of North Africa, and the Sea Peoples would have had to push through Egypt if they wanted to get to Amoni Ram. It's not perfect, and the evidence is circumstantial, but it's something. Though it raises two more questions that have been nagging at me. The first, what happened to the historical records of the wretch? If a culture really did sweep through North Africa and then obliterate half of Asia, there has to be some kind of archaeological record of it. It doesn't make sense. And the second, why would Robert Bumero be so terrified of something from 3,000 years ago? Despite the finalization of the culture briefing, the primary goal of the MAMJUL KORAR initiative remained to construct an accurate timeline leading to the fall of the anomalous empires and identify the abominate wretch. Dr. Galenus sessions with the Rajmata had reached the fall of Amoni Ram in approximately 1200 BCE, which is where the historical model constructed by Dr. Hedvig Nussbaum ended. At this crucial precipice, the Council unanimously agreed to permit further sessions. Addendum. Attached transcript, April 2003. Source, Dr. Pandora Galenus. Begin log. Galenus and Greaves are standing in a lush verdant rainforest. Ahead of them, the trees grow thinner, eventually turning into a wide clearing in which sits a large village. Several dozen large stone buildings and many smaller wooden huts form the low, flat settlement. The architecture is consistent with many of the constructions in MAMJUL and KORAR. Aside from the pair, there is no one else visible. Galenus, what the hell? Where are we? Greaves, this is a dream. But I don't know where. Galenus, where is everybody? The Rajmata isn't here. Nobody's here. Greaves, wait. He pauses. His hand unconsciously goes to his side. Greaves, something's wrong. I recognize this feeling. Rajmata, I had a feeling you would. Greaves Girus. The Rajmata materializes out of the trees, standing tall and draped in robes. Galenus, whoa. Sorry. You startled me. Rajmata, my apologies. But I had to gauge something. Greaves, what? Rajmata, whether you were able to recognize an ambush. Look. She waves a hand out towards the empty clearing. Galenus, there's nobody there. Greaves, yes there is. They're everywhere. Rajmata, very good. And shimmer passes over the field of view. The incandescent silhouettes of hundreds of Diva are briefly visible, crouching on the floor or standing in formation, armed with all manner of weaponry. They face the far end of the clearing. Galenus, remarkable. They are invisible. Rajmata, a brief spell by one of the sorcerers. Simply a temporary measure. Greaves, what for? Rajmata, for this. Distant. A horn sounds, growing closer. For a minute, nothing happens. Then a massive, black horde rushes out of the trees, charging the Diva line. The Diva flanks rush forward, crashing into the enemy. Shouting, yelling, and screaming immediately fill the air, punctuated by the horn and the steady beats of war drums. Galenus, those aren't the Nalka. They are human. Rajmata, the Blacksters horde, the three-prong army. They watch as the soldiers charge out of the tree line. They are human warriors, dressed in dark armors and leathers, tanned skin visible underneath. The generals and leaders are clothed entirely in suits of plated armor. They don't appear to use any specific kinds of magic or anomalies, just simple bronze weapons and wooden siege engines, their sheer numbers and ferocity enough to force the diva backwards. Greaves, they just look like any old painting of ancient soldiers. What was their deal? Rajmata, they scorned our magic. Not just that of the diva, all of ours. The Nalka, the Mekhanites as well. They had no qualms using it against us, but they were not believers. Galenus, they must have had some kind of advantage, if they were able to take Amoni Ram and give you a fair right. Rajmata, they did. But their advantage was not in the weapons they used, in this sense, they were utterly human. Their advantage was in their leader. After Amoni Ram fell, I recalled our armies from the Eastern Front. Half of our largest force had vanished. She catches herself. Rajmata had been killed. We were going to be marched on by the three-prong army. They were too powerful for me to split my forces. Greaves, you recalled the armies to MAMJUL? Rajmata, no. Not to MAMJUL. To Thijam, a smaller city on a narrow isthmus, forming the link between our peninsula and the mainland. Greaves, a choke point. Rajmata, yes. The three-prong army was far larger than mine. I had to reduce their numbers, so I elected to trap them at Thijam. But that took several months of full retreat. Our armies scavenging the land for sustenance while running, tails tucked between their legs, from Amoni Ram back to the homeland. But if we didn't offer any resistance, the faster and lighter armies of the wretch would catch up. With no supply trains, no civilians, nothing weighing them down, they would catch up, and they would massacre us. Greaves, oh, no. Galenus, what is it? I don't understand. Greaves, it was a feigned retreat. But she had to leave behind just enough soldiers to put up resistance and prevent the pursuing force from catching up. No chance of victory, just buying time and hoping the main force escapes. Galenus, abandoning entire armies to the wolves. Rajmata, they were sacrifices. They knew this. Thousands of soldiers, left behind in abandoned settlements as pockets of resistance. They were little more than bumps in the road. The wretch washed through from the desert, pushing through the last vestiges of the Mekhanite territory before smashing into our own. The Rajmata sighs, and looks at the carnage occurring past the tree line. The three-prong army is massive, endless soldiers dressed in black metal armor and armed with long pikes, lances, and swords continue to pour out of the trees. Rajmata, so many lost. The scene begins to cycle. It switches to a similar scene in a more temperate jungle that is aflame. The Covenant and the three-prong army clash amidst thick foliage and underbrush set on a rapidly spreading fire. Charred bodies litter the ground, and a number of diva are covered in fire eating away at them. It switches to a wide, flat desert plain, with a number of Covenant soldiers forming a defensive line of thick shields. A huge force of wretch cavalry on massive black horses crash into the waiting phalanx and shatter it, routing the army. The Abominate's forces lay siege engines against the walls of a settlement, leaping over the battlements while artillery barrages the defenses. Dozens of scenes like this play out. Rajmata, he destroyed my empire long before he took MAMJUL. We abandoned cities, people, spirits, everything to the horde. We were walking dead. Galenus, who? The Rajmata points a long hand forward. In every scene, a figure is visible. Dressed in the intricately formed black armor of the three-prong army, his head is obscured by a large, spiked metal crown. His shoulders are draped in a long, dark cape. Unlike the rest of the soldiers, his only weapon is a single sword hanging by his side. Rather than charging headlong into the fray, he remains on the front lines but in a rearward position. His expression is obscured. Greaves, he must be their commander. Gallinus, the Blackster. Rajmata, yes. The blood of nations drenches him. One of the most powerful beings to ever walk the face of this planet. Gallinus, he just looks like a regular person. Rajmata, he is not a human. But he was, once. That is what makes him so dangerous. Why we could not face him directly on an open field. Why I had to abandon my men to the wolves while I bought time. Gallinus, what were you buying time for? Rajmata, I recalled the home guards of our smaller cities to the Isthmus of Thijam. The scene shifts to a view of a small, largely empty narrow strip of land with seas on either side. A ramshackle village of straw huts and roots is visible near one of the beaches. Rajmata, it was once a quiet fishing village. Slaves would man vessels from sunup to sundown, bringing in their catch to be sold. There was an annual festival, wherein the catch would be slaughtered along with a number of slaves, their blood mixing and pouring into the sea, making the surf run red with blessings. This tiny strip of land connected us to the mainland, allowed us to trade with the fledgling city-states of your people. In fast forward, a large, disorganized party of Devic soldiers arrive from the north and make camp on the southern side of the isthmus. They are followed in quick succession by more forces, bloody armies arriving in retreat from the north under scarlet banners, fresh reinforcements from the south, beasts of war, siege engines. More and more soldiers arrive, the encampment swelling to at least 100,000 troops, stretching far into the south, until they stop. Greaves, what, then? Just lying in wait for them to come and kill you? Rajmata, quite the opposite. A line of finely dressed sorcerers stretches down the width of the isthmus, at least 25 kilometers. They dig their hands into the ground and, with an inhuman effort, raise the beginnings of a wall, made of intertwined stone and sand and root and vine, petrified and hardened. It slowly rises out of the ground, inch by inch, until the sorcerers collapse, many of them clearly exsanguinated of all the blood in their body. Soldiers rush forward with tools, fortifying and expanding the structure, even as the dead sorcerers are replaced, their blood spilt into the foundations of the wall, and replaced. The cycle continues as the sun sets and rises and sets and rises, until the wall is dozens of meters high and as thick as a building. Staircases and ladders let soldiers man the high battlements. Gallinus, that has to be as tall as the Great Wall of China. No, taller. By a lot. Greaves, thicker, too. How did you manage this without architects, construction machines, anything? Rajmata, do you see the gateway? Greaves, no. There isn't one. Rajmata, yes. Anyone on the other side of that wall was going to be killed. This was our last stand. That is what drove us. What drove me? The understanding that I must do what I have to do for my people to survive. Because if I didn't, we wouldn't. Gallinus, but your people didn't survive, did they? MAMJUL is still at the bottom of the ocean, and the Covenant is dead. Silence. Rajmata, no. I failed. Gallinus, we need to know what this thing is. We need to know how it broke you. Rajmata, this method of showing you my memories is a loophole in the laws that I have been bound to. That the Deva have been bound to. You are seeing more than any living creature in 3,000 years has. Gallinus, I appreciate that, but it's not enough. If this Blackster still lives, if the god he serves still exists, we need to understand them to be able to defend ourselves. Gallinus swallows nervously. Gallinus, I have to again pose the idea that I be allowed to commune with your master. Silence. Rajmata, you wish to speak to the Scarlet? Galenus, yes. It's a god, right? It knows the abominate or the wretch or whatever. It cast it out to sea. It's the easiest way to learn what we need to know. Rajmata, communing with the Scarlet is a dangerous task. Galenus here. I have been wedded to it for centuries, and I have only done so a handful of times. To commune is to invite another presence into your mind. To invite a god into your mind, like packing the seas of the world into a pot. The pressure would annihilate you from the inside out. Grieves, but if you have a strong enough pot, a strong enough vessel. Rajmata, perhaps then. But the last time when a man had such fortitude was the founding of our covenant. I appreciate your struggle, but it is not a possibility. Grieves, fine, okay. The Rajmata clutches her forehead and the dream around the group shimmers. Galenus, are you okay? Rajmata, yes. Yes. Projecting the dream is just intensive. I am not as young as I once was. I must rest. Galenus, that sounds like a good idea. The projection dematerializes, melting into puddles of nothingness that drip off the boughs of the tree. They are still in the canopy of the tree, shaded by the branches. The Rajmata is supported by a flock of the masked brides, their horns draped in veils. Rajmata, goodbye. Grevsgiris and Galenus here. Galenus dematerializes out of the astral projection, fading into a cloud of glimmering noise. Lieutenant. Greaves lingers, staring at the Rajmata. Rajmata, Grevsgiris? Greaves, what do you think we're doing here? Rajmata, what do you mean? Greaves, you just told me and the doctor about your sacrifice. About your willingness to do anything if it meant your people would live to see another day. Rajmata, what of it? Greaves, you failed. But we haven't yet. We might still have a shot at surviving. Greaves points at the Rajmata. Greaves, we're willing to do whatever it takes. If you deny us access to what we need to save ourselves, it won't just be your own blood on your hands. It'll be ours too. Greaves dematerializes and ends the projection. End log. On the 3rd of May, the first group of researchers from the Thaumaturgy division arrived at MKF-01 via helicopter. Due to their unique requirements, the Thaumaturgy team was quartered aboard the Hafkeen with the Psychotronics division personnel. A meeting of the research committee was held shortly thereafter to determine the level of involvement and direction the team would have. As the Psychotronics division personnel had successfully mastered the process of inducing projections, SCP-1867 was transported back to Site-19 via the same helicopter as it departed MKF-01. Addendum. Attached document, May 2003. In attendance. Dr. Pandora Galenus, Project Lead Led. Lieutenant Lucian Graves, Security Team Led Siku. Senior. Researcher Levi Sheridan, Archaeology Team Led Arch. Senior. Researcher Xing Yijin, Linguistic Analysis Team Led Ling. Senior. Researcher Vijay Ramaswamy, Parahistory Team Led Hist. Dr. Gabrielle Kerrick, Thaumaturgy Team Led THAU. Begin log. Galenus and Greaves enter the conference room aboard the Phantom. The research committee is already assembled and waiting. The leads are seated around the conference table, without any aides. Sheridan is standing. Galenus, hello, everyone. Carl and RJ couldn't join us today, I'm afraid. A low murmur of greeting runs throughout. Sheridan Arch, I'd like to apologize for my behavior in the last meeting, Dr. Galenus. It was inappropriate and rude, and I should have voiced my concerns more professionally. Galenus, that's. Thank you, Doctor. Sheridan. Sheridan Arch, I still retain my concerns, and I think that we've gotten a little biased in our analysis, but, you know. Galenus, of course. If we're all comfortable with moving on now, we have a new face. Welcome, Doctor. Kerrick. Kerrick, THAU, thank you. Happy to be here. Galenus, is your team settled in? Kerrick, THAU, as settled in as one can be aboard a floating tin can, yes. She laughs. Kerrick, THAU, no offense to any of you, of course. It's just that we're not a very nautical bunch. Galenus, none of us were when the project started. Except Lucian, maybe. I'm pretty sure he was born in the Marines. They nudged him, and Greaves smiles slightly. Galenus, are you finding our analysis sufficient? Kerrick, THAU, not quite, I'm afraid. It's a very solid start, especially for people who aren't thaumaturges, but all thaumaturgy really is a framework for understanding magic. To understand what drove the Diva's magic, and how we can utilize and recreate that, would require my team to converse directly with them. Galenus, that can be arranged. You should sit down with Crowley from Psychotronics, and arrange tests for your apprentices. See which ones will have the easiest time getting into KORAR. Kerrick, THAU, researchers is fine. And that'll definitely help, but the problem is Marizo that we don't really feel comfortable tapping into spirits for our thaumaturgy yet without a greater understanding of the processes at play. What we'll be able to do without the Diva is limited. I'm just trying to set a realistic expectation for you. We're simply not going to be able to do the miracles they were, at least not at first. Galenus, that's fine, so long as there's progress. Yijin, Ling, oh, that reminds me, researcher Crowley asked me to pass along a message to you, Doctor. She noticed that the equipment they use in Psychotronics to stabilize and support the astral projections were seeing increased power draw. Something about needing to work harder to keep the projection stable. I don't know what it means, but. Galenus, that's odd. I'll get into it, thanks. Ramaswamy hissed. Speaking of progress, I have looked into the Sea Peoples, as you asked me to. Galenus, find anything? Ramaswamy hissed. Almost nothing. The old files from Amoni Ram indicate the Middle Kingdom pharaohs were at least aware of the anomalous empires, which might help explain why only a temple in Egypt has any record of their existence. But Amoni Ram was also conspicuously lacking in contemporary sources, and it existed fine. Galenus, gut feeling? Ramaswamy hissed. I do not believe in coincidences, Doctor. Galenus. The surviving Mekhanites spread their culture and technology throughout the Middle East and North Africa, but lacked any contemporary source. They only appeared in the Quran as Iram. The Diva appear to have done the same for Indian culture, taking the role of Kumari Kandam. It stands to reason that this three-prong army are the kernel of truth behind the myth of the Sea People. They certainly would have had to push through the region on their way to MAMJUL and beyond. Sheridan Arch, I should mention the only thing the mundane archaeological community has ever found related to the Sea People were bronze weapons. Ramaswamy hissed. I do not understand the relevance. Galenus, the Rajmata mentions the Blacksters' forces looted Amoni Ram. And scuffed Fulad looks an awful lot like bronze. It just makes too much sense. Keep looking into it. Ramaswamy hissed. Of course. Sheridan Arch, what's up with that name, by the way? Three-prong army, does that mean anything for the Diva? Zijin, Ling, I had the same thought. I looked through the preliminary translation dictionary we've compiled of the oral language. Obviously a written one is impossible, and as far as I can tell nothing. It quite literally just means 3 points. Ramaswamy hissed. Maybe a descriptor of their military strategy? A three-pronged attack. Sheridan Arch could be referring to a trident. Gallinus, that would certainly fit with the Sea People theory. Remind me to ask the Rajmata next time. Sheridan Arch, also on the docket, Thijam. Based on your description of her memories, it seems like it would be an isthmus connection, the landmass of, well, I guess we're calling it Kumari Kandam now, to mainland India. Ramaswamy hissed. Isthmuses have historically been of great importance in ancient cultures. Constantinople monopolized trade between the East and West by residing on one. I do not need to tell you how critical the Suez is. It makes sense they would make their choke point there. Sheridan Arch, yeah, but the problem is that we can't find it. We don't even have a very good understanding of what the continent looked like back then. Just maps from Amoni Ram we know are altered and maps from Blackwood's journals that are as likely to be right as they are wrong. The narrowest point of the isthmus could be a kilometer south of the tip of India, 100, or even inland. There's just no way to know. Gallinus, I'll see what information I can get, but keep working on it. He sighs. Gallinus, is there something else? Sheridan Arch, permission to speak freely? Gallinus, I'm not your commanding officer, Levi. Say what's on your mind. Sheridan Arch, it feels like we're at a point where we've run out of knowledge to collect. And we're not any closer to finding out our answers. Gallinus, that's not true. We've learned a lot about the Diva. What they were, what happened to the world after Amoni Ram fell. Sheridan Arch, I'm an archaeologist, doctor. I know firsthand what it means to search after knowledge most people will never appreciate, for the sake of nothing but the knowledge itself. But if this Blackster stuff is still an existential threat, we need knowledge we can apply. And we're not getting that here. Gallinus, doctor. Kerrick is making a great start on applying Diva magic. That's not applicable. Sheridan Arch, yeah, but Greaves, as the representative from the council, they are quite pleased with how the project is progressing under Dr. Gallinus. Everyone turns to look at Greaves. He remains silent. Sheridan Arch, I'm not questioning your leadership, Doctor. I'm just saying that I think it's time to go to the source of the knowledge. Gallinus, well, I'll take that into account. You guys know what you're working on. Dismissed. End log. Attached transcript, May 2003. Begin log. Greaves and Gallinus are standing on the deck of the Hafkeen, looking out over the Laccadive Sea. The permanent attachments to the Phantom are being maintained by the seamen. Gallinus, thanks for sticking up for me back there. I appreciate it. Greaves, I was telling the truth. He shrugs his rifle out of the way, removes a lighter from his vest pocket, and lights a cigarette before lifting it to his lips and taking a drag. Gallinus, still. Greaves, I've worked in the Foundation very nearly all my life. Our academics tend to get myopic. Sometimes they need a reminder of who's signing their paychecks. No offense. Gallinus, none taken. You're hardly wrong, though it's also not a problem confined to the Foundation. Greaves, I'm sure. It's just all I know. Gallinus, you've really been working for them, for us your whole life. Greaves, I was 21 when Vietnam ended. No college, no prospects. Had a friend who said he knew a government agency that was willing to hire veterans who didn't ask questions. Did a year in site security, then worked in all sorts of mobile task forces. Nu 7, Zeta 9, Eta 5, Until I got handpicked for the big one. Silence as Greaves takes another drag. Galenus, so you've killed people, then? He looks at them askance. Galenus, sorry. Greaves, you're alright. Yeah, I've killed people. But I'm not one of those Kilgore nut jobs. I don't take any pleasure in it, and at least for the Foundation, I know it serves a greater purpose than some political game. Galenus, how's that? Greaves, shooting at rice farmers with AKs to stop the Red Menace isn't doing anything for anyone. Shooting at someone who plans to release and recapture the lizard to use in his Nazi PMC? Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable doing that. Galenus, still, I mean, it can't be easy, right? Killing someone. Greaves, oh, no. He shakes his head. Greaves, killing someone is the easiest thing in the world. It's what comes after that's the hard part. Galenus, how do you deal with it? Greaves takes another drag from the cigarette. Greaves, I have a kid. She's 13. Plays the clarinet. These people, the Mechanites and Serpent's Hand and whoever, would have her live in a world filled with danger, where science and human society can't survive, where wizards and terrifying monsters are a real possibility. I ask myself what I would do to ensure that she has a future to look forward to. Galenus, the answer? Greaves, pretty much anything. Galenus, explains the loyalty. Greaves, Foundation's the only thing holding this world together. Yeah, I take orders to kill for them, because it's my role to play. He offers the cigarette to Galenus, who waves their hand. Galenus, I was never any good at taking orders. I'm still not. Greaves, you seem to be doing fine. 05-1 certainly thinks so. Galenus, I'm being pulled in about 30 different directions at once. The half of the research committee that thinks we've all gone off the deep end. The half of the research committee that thinks the others are being ethnocentric troglodytes. The council, 05-1. The Rajmata, not to mention the initiative itself. Greaves, conflicting orders are a bitch. That's for certain. Galenus, it's a lot of pressure. Greaves, you'll get it done. Galenus, why does everyone seem so sure of that? Greaves, because you're a leader, kid. Leaders rise to the occasion. They do what has to be done. Galenus, I don't feel like a leader. Greaves, that's usually the first sign you'll make a good one. They stand in silence for some time, watching the waves. It is late afternoon, and the cloudless sky seems to stretch on forever. Greaves, awfully calm. Galenus, that's what it looks like. Greaves, not to you? They shake their head. Galenus, no. And no one seems to realize it. Well, except for you. Greaves, me. Galenus, you've sat in on all the meetings with the Rajmata. We're about to learn how the wretch destroyed MAMJUL. And once we have that, show's over. The council has what it wants, and we transition fully to trying to weaponize the knowledge we've worked so hard to collect. Greaves flicks the cigarette butt into the sea. It floats on the water for a moment before sinking out of sight. Greaves, you don't think we should use what we've learned from them to defend ourselves? Galenus, I think that we have an ethical responsibility to both respect the Divas culture, and to make sure they don't get any power. Because the last time they did, they enslaved a solid chunk of the population of Asia. And I think that the last time we tried to weaponize the powers of one of these cultures. Greaves, I don't see how researching their magic to apply ourselves is inherently evil. There's risks, for sure. I've heard about Project London Bridge, but that was 30 years ago. We're better at this sort of thing now. Galenus, honestly, I don't think it's evil either. But It's complicated. It's also not what I signed up for. I'm a historian, and I came here to study history no one had ever seen before. Not this. I feel like. They sigh. Galenus, like we're standing on a precipice, and no one realizes it except for me. Greaves, nobody you can talk to? Galenus, the only other person who's ever been in this position is currently a fugitive from Foundation custody, so. They both chuckle. Greaves, fair enough. Well, if you ever do need an ear. Galenus, thanks. Really. We have a session with the Rajmata tomorrow night, by the way. Greaves, I remember. This should answer some outstanding questions. Any reason we're waiting? Galenus, the psychotronics team is fiddling with the machinery. There have been some issues with people randomly dropping out of the projection, like a bad phone connection. Not sure what to make of it yet, but hopefully it's just an equipment issue. Greaves, hopefully. Galenus, hey, Lucian, you have a higher clearance than me, right? Greaves, that's not really how clearance works, but sure. Galenus, That weird effect when the Rajmata said Blackster got me thinking, so I ran a few queries against the Memetics Division database. Keep running into blockers. Redactions, expungements, clearance checks. Greaves, with MEMDIV, they're probably there for good reason. Galenus, still, I think it could be of use. Would you mind bringing it up to the council next time you check in? Just, pass along the request. Pause. Greaves, sure, kid. Galenus, thanks. I'll see you in the mess. Greaves, got some work to take care of. We'll meet tomorrow for the thing. End log. Lieutenant Graves and Dr. Galenus entered into another astral projection with the Rajmata on the 23rd of May, with the goal of determining how exactly the Blackster was able to take MAMJUL and exterminate the Devic Covenant. Addendum. Attached transcript, May 2003. Source, Dr. Pandora Galenus. Begin log. Galenus and Greaves enter the dream. They are in KORAR, standing on the great wall that surrounds the city. The Rajmata, alone and without her handmaidens, her face veiled, stands looking out across the featureless cosmic expanse. Lightning strikes aimlessly in the distance, spiderwebbing across the dark sky before fizzling out. Galenus, greetings, Your Grace. Rajmata, look. What do you see? Greaves, the astral plane. Emptiness. Rajmata, what is it, though? What is the essence of the astral plane? Galenus, it's another layer to reality, right? Superimposed on top of our own. Rajmata, not incorrect, but at once not what I was hoping to hear. Greaves, it's a dream. Rajmata, He understands. She waves a long, slender hand out. Rajmata, all this was once supported by the minds of everyone in our sister city, when they dreamt. Our existence depended on them, and theirs on us. Now, there is no MAMJUL to rely on. KORAR rests entirely on the dream of the Scarlet Maharaja. Galenus, your husband. She pauses. Rajmata, I suppose. We have no particular word for a male spouse. Every relationship in the world is formed of the dominant and the subservient elements. Master and slave. I am master to my people, and the Maharaja is master to me. Galenus, you don't have a conception of gender, then. Interesting. Rajmata, not in the way you would think of it. The physical body is irrelevant. All our souls rest in KORAR, and the form one takes in MAMJUL in between reincarnations should not dictate their lot in life. Surely they have experienced enough lives in enough forms to make any such determination irrelevant. People are what they wish to be. No more. Galenus. Interesting. Silence for a moment, as the party looks out before the wasteland beyond the walls. Galenus. So are we. Rajmata. Yes. Distantly, the chanting of the city takes on a different tone. Less wildly harmonious, and more into a somber register. A slower melody, the words so long and deep as to be incomprehensible. At the same time, the view changes. Grass sprouts out of nowhere far below and spreads, trees forming out of non-existence. The sky goes from star-studded blackness to a deep blue, the sun hanging overhead. KORAR melts away behind them, replaced by vast plains, and countless figures crawl out of the dust. In a few moments, they are standing atop the battlement at the wall of Thijum. In front of them lies a vast, unspeakably large army. Formed into tight regiments, they mass around the base of the wall with siege engines that are not even half the height of the gargantuan barrier. At this height, each soldier is the size of an ant, and the swarm spreads far, far into the foggy distance. Greaves, that has to be 500,000 men. Good God. Twice the size of the largest army ever fielded. Galenus, not just them. Turn around, loose. Greaves turns. On the other side of the wall lies another massive force, not as unfathomably large as the three-prong army, but the Devic Covenant occupy the vast kilometers of beach between them and the jungle line. They are organized into massive lines, columns extended to meet a charge. From this height, far to the south, beyond the Devic Covenant, the huge boughs of the citadel tree are visible. The wall is the only thing that separates the two forces. Greaves, this has to be that largest battle ever fought. At least 1 million men, on one battlefield. The mother of all choker points. Rajmata, such was my belief. That the sheer size of the wall and the army would demoralize them. I was, needless to say, fatally incorrect. In fast forward, the sun sets and drops below the horizon. A scattering of huge bonfires form on both sides of the wall, soldiers gathering around them. The siege engines have been disassembled, the attempts at scaling the wall are obviously pointless. Instead, they are reassembled into a collection of trebuchets, catapults, and ballistas, all aimed at the top of the wall. With large, heavy booms, their payloads of huge stone boulders and explosive tar collide with the battlements. Deva soldiers huddle behind the stone barriers as the wall shakes with every impact. Shakes, but holds firm, hour after hour, night after night, as they return fire with their own weapons of war and sorcerers. Rajmata, I underestimated the interminable nature of human persistence. I thought they would realize the wall was impenetrable. Not just physically, I sealed it myself, with a ward wrought in blood. Galenus, blood sacrifices are common in your magical school. What's so special about this one? Rajmata, they are. But the more powerful the sacrifice, the stronger the magic. Pause. I rest comfortable in the knowledge that my children would have been slaughtered regardless of whether the horde broke through. Silence. Galenus, you killed your children? Rajmata, 7 bodies, 7 wards, 7 chains to protect the Scarlet Maharaja from those that would seek to destroy him. Their souls belonged to KORAR, to him. I simply did what he commanded, and released their physical form with the same dagger I was anointed with. Galenus, the black dagger Khan team found in the throne room. That's why it survived when nothing else did. Silence. Rajmata, their flesh, so sweet, so innocent. The ultimate sacrifice for the ultimate protection. Suddenly, she turns and spits on the stone wall. Rajmata, and look now. The scene continues to fast forward. The sun rises, and sets, and rises, and sets. The siege carries on for a week, then 2 weeks, then a month, then 2 months, then 6. The wall continues to be battered, and stand firm. The vines and toxic clouds and poisoners falling from the walls collide below, thinning out the Blacksters' forces, before they are immediately crowded out and replaced. The defenders are killed and replaced by more reserves from the amassed army. Sorcerers raise water spirits to destroy any attempt to cross from the sea. Grieves, they are not going away. Laying siege to it, just like how they did to Amoni Ram. But MAMJUL is protected, far to the south. You're clearly holding out. What happened? Rajmata, their master arrived. A ravine forms in the vast army as soldiers separate, standing a respectful distance away from one figure. He appears to be a regular man, but his very presence is larger than life. The battlefield bows toward him as he makes his way to the encampment, flanked by his guard. A full moon hangs overhead in the smoky sky. He disappears into a tent. Grieves, what the hell is that thing? Every time I look at him. Galenus, it feels like my brain is boiling. Grieves, yeah. Like he can see me. Rajmata, most magicians in this world are simply that, magicians. Sorcerers, warlocks. People who have a particular leaning towards the esoteric arts and have studied years to apply them to perform even the slightest magic. He is something else. The world itself shapes around him. Galenus, oh, shit. A reality bender. Grieves, has to be class 4, at least. Maybe class 5. Galenus, that's theoretical. Grieves, they're all theoretical, Pan. We haven't seen anything above class 2 in decades. Rajmata, I do not understand. Explain. Galenus, they are called onto kinetics. Reality benders, more informally. People who can mold the world to whatever they want. This is the most powerful we've seen in a long, long time. Rajmata, I see. Such is the blessing of a god. Galenus, what did he do? I honestly don't know how reality bending would interact with the magic you did. It's an unexplored field. Rajmata, he stayed in that tent for 7 days and 7 nights. And for all that time, the abominate, the wretch, his god hung overhead, lending him power. Galenus, what do you, the moon? Rajmata, look. Ahead, the bright whiteness of the full moon over the battlefield is fading as it blackens. It sinks low, a dark star in the sky, blackened and scorched, surrounded by a corona of white light, burning like the eye of a great dead god. After some time, the sun rises, but the moon remains locked in place, hovering over the horde. The tides of the sea malform, twisting and turning, rising and falling in different directions. Rajmata, do you feel it? Galenus, I feel sick to my stomach. Like I'm going to vomit. Rajmata, yes. This is the wretch. Primarch of chaos, lord of disorder. Where it goes, the natural laws that govern us fail. Once, the Mechanites accused us of being wild people. In a sense they were right, but even in the most untamed wilds, a natural harmony emerges. Survival of the fittest, domination of the meek, the cycle of life. That is what the Scarlet embodies. She looks out towards the battlefield as the waters rise even higher and turn into rough, raging seas, inching up the beach, constricting the Devic forces into tighter columns. Rajmata, and on the 8th day, he emerged, bathed in the blood of my people. A figure exits the tent. The army separates around him, flowing like water, as he marches, alone, to the base of the wall. The defenders sling vines and casks and magic, and all disintegrate before ever reaching him. A storm has gathered overhead, dark clouds, Hard sheets of cold rain slamming into the muddy ground and the stone walls. Lightning spiderwebs across the sky and the sea slam into the land as the black moon watches its prophet make his way to the base of the wall, and kneel, brow dripping sweat, hands dripping blood. Rajmata, and he raised his hands, and connection severed. The projection dematerializes. Dr. Galenus reawakens aboard the Half-Keen, gasping for air and clutching their head. Galenus, what the fuck just happened? Silence. Galenus, loose. End log. In the middle of the astral projection, a sudden and unprecedented equipment failure occurred in the psychotronics lab aboard the Half-Keen. The projection lost connection, and several pieces of equipment were heavily damaged. Dr. Galenus awoke unharmed, but for unknown reasons. Lieutenant Graves remained unconscious and in the fugue state. An hour later, he slipped into a coma. The immediate assessment by Psychotronics Division personnel and medical personnel aboard the Phantom was that the LSAP array embedded in Lieutenant Graves' brain resulted in some kind of adverse reaction to the psychic backlash, or was in fact the cause thereof. Before any decision could be reached on moving him to the infirmary, or extracting the array from his brain, the array reactivated despite no longer being attached to any discernible power source. The transcript printer it was attached to began printing a large amount of nonsense text with no clear meaning or purpose, and extremely faint delta waves were detected from Lieutenant Graves in an EKG. Per Dr. Galenus orders, the Half-Keen was temporarily quarantined. Re-entry into KORAR was not possible until replacement components for the damaged equipment were rush-ordered from the nearby MKF-02 and delivered via helicopter to the ships. Due to the time-sensitive nature of the project, typical Foundation practices to obscure logistical transportation were ignored. The components were installed on the 25th of May, and, 2 days after contact was lost, Dr. Galenus re-entered the astral projection with the directive of assessing Lieutenant Graves' status and, if possible, recovering him. Addendum. Attached transcript, May 2003. Source, Dr. Pandora Galenus. Begin log. Crowley, remember, Doctor. If anything seems weird or off, pull out immediately. If we don't get you back within 6 hours, we're going to quarantine the ship indefinitely. Galenus, yeah. Yeah, okay. Crowley hands Galenus a small plastic cup with 2 RL-023 pills. They down them with a cup of water, and lean back in their seat, closing their eyes. They drift away, leaving their body, settling through space. Then they open their eyes. Galenus, loose. They are standing where they had been before the projection dematerialized, on the wall of Thijam, overlooking the vast horde of the Three-Prong Army. But time is frozen, the sheets of rain hang in the air, trembling. The surf of the rough waves is frozen in mid-splash. But despite the stillness, it is not silent. Drums beat through the air, far, far louder than ever before. The voices making up the chorus are high and strong, reaching a loud peak as they sing out from every direction. The Rajmata and Greaves stand overlooking the tableau. He turns. Greaves, Pandora. They run to greet each other. Greaves, what happened? You just vanished. It's been hours. Galenus, Lucian, it's been 3 days. Greaves, I don't understand. Galenus, there was an accident. An equipment failure in the lab. It pulled us out of the projection but, you didn't wake up. You slipped into a coma. And the array kept outputting nonsense text, stuff about dreams and waves and the sea. Greaves, I'm in a coma? Galenus, it's okay. Calm down. We're gonna wake you up. Rajmata, not yet. Galenus, fuck that. We're leaving. Rajmata, listen around you. Listen to the dreams, the growth of the words, spreading across, covering all. The song of the diva has arrived at its final verses, the crescendo. Crafted by us even as the waves bore down, so that we would always remember who rent us. Galenus, sure, but I don't see how. Rajmata, listen. You cannot leave now. You have come so far. We have both come so far. You must listen to our song. You must be our chronicler. Greaves, we can come back, we'll. Rajmata, you will not be able to come back. Galenus, we always have in the past. The equipment's been repaired, we'll return once Lucian's been treated. The Rajmata sighs, holding her head. The world around them shudders and glimmers for a moment. Greaves, did you see that? Rajmata, the failure of the projection was not a failure of your equipment. Galenus here. The dream. KORAR has been splitting apart, failing, fraying at the edges of our great tapestry. Galenus, what does that mean? This is the Maharaja's dream, isn't it? Rajmata, and he was able to support us, quietly worshipping him, for 3,000 years. We had a balance, a harmony formed of primal violence. And your arrival has upset it. Upset him. Galenus, well, we didn't mean. Rajmata, your intentions do not matter now, I'm afraid. The dream is collapsing. Leave now, and there will be no KORAR for you to return to. The secrets of the diva will go with us to whatever lies beyond paradise. Galenus, you'll all be destroyed, you mean. Rajmata, there is nobody willing to take the interminable burden of being the Maharaja, the dreamer. A diva cannot do it, we need one of the covenant. A human. The Maharaja's physical body has long since rotted into dust, at the bottom of the sea. There is no one. Galenus, we'll find a different way. Lucian. Greaves, no. We have to listen. Galenus, are you insane? We already have no idea how much time has passed. Greaves, this is it. This is the home stretch. If we don't take it home now, it'll all have been for nothing. Galenus, but. Greaves, I have an obligation. I'm staying. Galenus, fine. They turn to the Rajmata. Greaves, hurry. With a deep groan from the Rajmata, the dream suddenly continues. The rain slams down, the waves crash, the Blackster slams his palms against the ground, and the ground begins to shake as the moon hangs yet lower. Against the crescendo of drums, the Divic army tightens its grip on its weapons and braces itself for a charge that will never come. Rajmata, he knew he could not take the wall. So he broadened his scope. Like the animal that sees he cannot drag home the carcass, and resolves to consume it all then. His god was thrown into the sea, and spent 1,000 years crawling back up to land. Only to turn around and do the same to us. The waves on either side of the isthmus crash again, this time substantially higher. The army looks to their sides and again tightens, only for the waves to grow even higher. The forces at the rear begin a retreat, one that quickly turns to a rout. The army rushes back even as the water rushes forth from either side, drowning the base of the wall. The ground shudders again, and the soldiers in the center of the mass realize what is happening. The sea is not rising. They are sinking. Rajmata, look. They float off the top of the wall, rising into the air higher and higher, climbing well into the sky, past the clouds until the minuscule soldiers disappear completely. Finally, they stop at a bird's eye view of the entire region. The continent is a large free-hanging peninsula extending forth from the tip of the Indian subcontinent. Thijam lies at the thinnest point, and MAMJUL lies near the center of the peninsula. As they watch, the entire landmass grows incrementally, marginally smaller. The moon draws yet closer, pulling the water, sinking Kumari Kandam beneath the waves. The coastal areas disappear in a frothing mass of blue as the waters make their way inland in raging floods and violent rain. Bit by bit, the entire continent drops below the sea, until only the highest point, a small patch of land containing MAMJUL, remains. Grieves, the deluge. Gallinus, he sank an entire continent, alone. That was millions of people, at least. Rajmata, no. By himself, he could have flooded the plain, routed my army. The wall would still prevent him from crossing south and taking MAMJUL. But by invoking his god, who lent him its power? Yes, he could sink a continent as easily as slitting a throat. Gallinus, that was it. The annihilation of the Diva. Wiped out in a matter of hours. Rajmata, no, Gallinus here. That was not the annihilation of the Diva. Gallinus, what could possibly be worse than that? Rajmata, witness the final hours of MAMJUL. The scene shifts to the streets of the city. Terrified, confused screaming fills the air as civilians, slaves, and soldiers run in every direction, attempting to escape to higher ground that does not exist. Mothers carry their babies, or are forced to leave them behind by the shoving of the crowd. Sorcerers rush to the battlements but find their abilities useless against the raging sea. Some citizens even raise their swords to slit their own throats, secure in their future in KORAR. Throughout all this the dream is strange, fragmented. It sounds and looks as though passed through 1,000 filters, breaking apart the image and putting it back together again. In front of the group lies a grand, marble-paneled building. Gallinus, this is the library. The dilapidated one we found in MAMJUL, filled with blank tablets. Rajmata, destroying us was not enough for the Blackster. No, where the Mechanites had ignored him until it was too late, we fought back. We held back the horde. For this affront, for daring to stand against him, he was not content to destroy us. He had to annihilate us. Scholars run through the halls of the huge library, diva and human. They carry huge armfuls of scrolls and tablets, plinths and statuettes, all carved with complex, swimming writing and pictographs, rushing to get them out of the way of the flood. But even as they do so, the tablets fade, as though rubbed clean of their etchings. The ink on the scrolls melts away. The statuettes and plinths lose all features and writing, and the carved etchings throughout the rest of the hall are rubbed just as clean. The scholars stare at their objects in wide-eyed shock, even as cold water begins to seep in from under the door. Gallinus, he wiped you from the historical record. Rajmata, the Devic Empire, once the pride of scholars and artists the world over, now reduced to nothing. No evidence of our existence. No writings, no monuments, no great chronicles to survive us. Gallinus, damnatio memoriae. Condemnation of memory. The ancient practice of scrubbing undesirable figures from official histories. But something on this scale. Grieves, he was breaking your spirit. The memory again flickers, twitching and melting in places. Rajmata, the Maharaja's dream is collapsing. We must hurry. Gallinus, what does that mean? They rise again into the sky, to a bird's eye view of MAMJUL. The raging waters around it build up against the triangular walls of the city, forming a thin barrier as the water rises, until it spills over. Buildings collapse, citizens drown under the deluge, forming a living wall of bloated bodies bearing down on others. They watch as, over the course of minutes, MAMJUL sinks into the ocean, exterminated of all life, a dead city sinking to its watery grave. The boughs of the citadel tree are the last to disappear under the waves. Rajmata, now you see. We were destroyed. Totally and utterly, and the song of the diva our only record of ourselves. I apologize for the deception, but I needed you to understand. To remember us, when there is no longer a dying king's dream to support us. Gallinus, but why didn't you just? A loud, resounding explosion sounds from above, ringing through the heavens. Greaves, is that the dream falling apart? Rajmata, no. That was not from the dream. End log. Section 1.8. Incident Hierophant. 2 hours and 44 minutes into Dr. Gallinus projection. The various sonar equipment placed in MAMJUL's ruins by the diving team also began reporting localized underwater disturbances. At the same time, several covert monitoring buoys that had been spread in concentric circles around the location of SCP-001 began pinging the bridge of the Phantom, reporting multiple unknown objects detected in the vicinity. Attached transcript. May 2003. Radio chatter. Phantom bridge to Overwatch Command. Phantom, Overwatch Command. This is FMS Phantom. Do you copy? OVCOM. We have your signal locked. Please confirm identity. Phantom, Phantom 1. Auth code Ziggurat Gamma 78911. OVCOM. Identity confirmed. Citra. Phantom. Several monitoring sites, both in SCP-001 and at our red radius, have sounded at the same time. OVCOM. Radar report. Phantom. A regular systems check resulted in a delay on the radar read. We're just about to receive it. Pause. Phantom. Fuck me running. OVCOM. Phantom. Phantom. Surface radar reports multiple unidentified flying objects moving southeast at high velocity, inbound to MKF-01. Repeat. Direct course with MKF-01. Attempting to get speed now. Objects are moving in excess of 450 km per hour, and are approximately 100 km away from our current position. ETA 13 minutes. OVCOM. Copy. Activate Protocol Westchester, and patch me into Captain Hickman. Stay in communication while protocol is executed. Camera logs. MKF-01. ETA. 1221. Various researchers and personnel occupy the mess hall of the Phantom, eating meals and engaging in casual chatter. They are suddenly interrupted by alarms sounding throughout the ship, and klaxon lights flashing red. Security personnel, both assigned ship security and MTF Alpha 1 troops, spread out in the large room and firmly escort researchers and personnel to their assigned quarters. Throughout the rest of the vessels, similar experiences unfold. Security officers seal bulkheads behind researchers packed into their labs and sleeping quarters. The research staff stare at each other worriedly, as the alarms continue to sound. In the psychotronics lab, several MTF Alpha 1 personnel move in, sealing the door behind them, and take up defensive positions around the bodies of Dr. Gallinus and Lieutenant Graves. ETA. 8:45. The remaining security personnel quickly move through the facility, grabbing weaponry from armories. Crates are pulled from storage rooms and opened, and security personnel hand out rifles. After receiving weapons, a number of personnel make their way to the top deck while others go lower. ETA. 6:09. Across the top deck, sailors, security personnel, and Alpha 1 operatives move to battle stations. Chain gun emplacements and cannons arranged across the top of the Phantom are quickly activated and loaded, sweeping across the sky in a northwestern direction. A number of large hatches pop open, filling the top deck with smoke as a dozen small missiles rocket away, turning into the distance. ETA. 3:01. In the lower decks, gunners crowd around the firing computers. The large automated cannons on the top deck activate, raising their barrels upward and firing another volley of missiles into the distance. They curve and fix their heading to follow their targets. ETA 2:15. A number of explosions are visible in the distant air. Dots become visible on the horizon exiting the smoke clouds and rapidly increasing in size and proximity. They are moving extremely quickly, but separate out as they near into at least 30-40 different figures. A number of them fall into the water, damaged by the missiles. Approximately 2/3 of them are still in the air. The sun is high overhead, but even at the distance, the light gleams off their bronze forms. The automated chain guns begin firing at them indiscriminately. ETA 0:24. Foundation personnel begin firing small arms. The chain guns fire and reload themselves constantly, switching between targets. The swarm of figures swoops overhead, each one now clearly a highly augmented humanoid with large, bronze wings. A female with the largest wingspan on an intricate set of white and gold wings hovers at a distance, then rockets around the ships, far outpacing the guns following her. The rest of the bronze-armored troops charge forward. Phantom, OVCOM. Come in OVCOM. FMS Phantom is under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. OVCOM. Copy. We've emergency scrambled naval support from MKF-02, but it may take some time to reach you. Can you identify your attackers? Static-ridden explosions. OVCOM. Phantom. Come in Phantom. Phantom. Out of breath. This is Phantom 1 Actual. Captain Hickman. It's the Mechanites. A number fly low and grab hold of security personnel, lifting them into the air and dropping them into the sea or onto the metal deck, where their bones shatter on impact. Chain guns swing around and lay suppressing fire onto the cloud of Mechanites. Wilcox, get down. Get the fuck down. They are dive bombing. Franklin, 9 o'clock, fire. One of the huge guns swivels on its base, following the largest cluster of Mechanites through the air, before firing. The shell collides with one of the armored figures before exploding on impact, dispersing the cluster and sending them sailing through the air. As the smoke clears, the figure at impact sails through the air and slams into the deck of the Half-Gene. Franklin, scratch 1. The deck of the ship shakes slightly, the waters around the Phantom growing rough and frothing. For a moment, the cloud of Mechanites hangs back. McNamara, what the fuck is that? Benoit, get away from the hull. With an explosion of spray and foam, 24 large bronze-armored figures rocket out of the water, slamming their swords into the sides of the ship. They began to crawl up the hull. Security personnel moved to the gunwale, leaning their weapons over the sides and firing straight down. 1 or 2 Mechanites' skulls shatter under the hail of gunfire and fall back into the sea, blood spreading into the water. The bullets harmlessly bounce off most of them as they continue to inch their way up the sides of the ship. Rodriguez, shit is not working. Switch to AP. The security personnel on the sides cover each other while they swap out to armor-piercing rounds. At the same time, the aerial contingent of Mechanites turn and make another pass over the decks of the ships, this time pulling out fuelad spears and driving them through the chests of security personnel. Phantom, OVCOM, there's a terrestrial group of them. Attempting to board and take the vessel. Requesting air support. Several of the flying Mechanites land on the deck of the Half-Gene, engaging personnel directly with close-quarters polearms and swords. Personnel turn the chain guns on them, hammering them with rounds from close proximity. Their advance is halted, but the bullets fail to pierce their fuelad armor. On the Phantom, the situation worsens as the boarding party begin to reach the top deck and pull themselves over. They are distinctly humanoid, but tall, and heavily augmented with Mechanite prosthetics and implants. What little of their skin is visible under the armor bulges with subdermal cables and wiring. They are armed with what appear to be primitive long rifles, which they turn on the security personnel and begin firing. Patel, bridge. Put up the barricades. Phantom, Roger. Several sections of the deck of the Phantom rise up and out, forming makeshift cover. Security personnel dash behind them, leaning out to fire their rifles. The large caliber rounds from the mechanite weapons slam into the barricades at high velocity, a few tearing completely through personnel, who collapse onto the ground, bleeding out. OVCOM. Additional reinforcements have been scrambled. An Indian Navy patrol group has been requisitioned, and is en route to your location. Fixed-wing aircraft have already been launched and are en route. Phantom, but OVCOM, we can amnesticize them after. Under no circumstances can the mechanites be allowed to take MKF-01. You need to survive until the support arrives. With the close quarters combat occurring on both decks, the remaining aerial mechanites can no longer effectively dive bomb and slam into the decks of the ships, drawing their weapons and making another advance. Under heavy machine gun fire, a handful drop to the ground, but most continue advancing. Allard, we're getting fucking massacred out here. Polries, bridge, we need reinforcements now. Through one of the doors, a group of hooded and armored personnel exit, shoulder-pads emblazoned with the sigil of the Thaumaturgy Division. They form a small phalanx, one drawing a sigil in the air that expands into a moving, translucent barrier. They press forward onto the deck where the firefight is occurring. The barrier trembles under the assault, but holds. Lion, are those the fucking wizards? Carrick, cover us. We're going to try to disable them. Okonkwo, move starboard. Keep the lane clear for them. The thaumaturges move forward, coming into within a few meters of the mechanites. Carrick holds the barrier while the others brace themselves against the ground and whisper. A few moments later, green, expanding vines creep out through the cracks in the deck and wrap around the ankles of one of the mechanites, causing him to crash into the ground. An Alpha 1 operative leans around the cover and empties a magazine into his unprotected nape. Vern, shit, that worked. Keep going. Carrick, it's too energy intensive, we can only get one at a time. We just don't have the power. The phalanx is temporarily pushed back by one of the mechanites charging them. On the half-plane, Alpha 1 personnel also flood out of the doors to the bridge and lay down suppressing fire from their weaponry. These weapons cause slightly more visible damage, but still fail to stop the advance towards the bridge. Phantom, all personnel, hold the line. Reinforcements are on their way. Jeffrey, they're not going to get here in time. We can't stop them. Addendum. Attached transcript, May 2003. Source, Lieutenant Graves. Begin log. Greaves, Gallinus, and the Rajmata hover in the air above MKF-01. The decks of all three ships are embroiled in firefights. Dead personnel and mechanites litter the decks, and the gunfire is deafening. From a bird's-eye view, it is clear that the mechanite advance is slow but steady, moving inch after inch towards the bridge and the access to the lower decks. Greaves, what the hell is this? Rajmata, what is currently occurring in the material plane above MAMJUL? Gallinus, wait, this is happening. Greaves, it's the fucking mechanites. How the hell did they find us? Gallinus, they must have caught the emergency equipment transfer. Shit. Shit. Greaves turns to the Rajmata. Greaves, you need to let me out of here. Right fucking now. Rajmata, look at it. It is a massacre. Your weaponry, even your primitive understanding of our magic, cannot hold a candle to the mechanites in their prime. And they have advanced quite. Greaves, I don't care. Let me out. The Rajmata cocks her head. Rajmata, You would walk into certain death? Greaves, those are my men getting slaughtered out there. We'll find a way to turn the tide. Rajmata, you will not. Greaves, then the least I can do is die alongside them. Galenus, you can't keep us here. Rajmata, I cannot. And you have what you wanted from me. And I from you. Greaves, then let me go. Rajmata, I am not keeping you here, Grevsgirus. Your mind is. Greaves, what are you talking about? Rajmata, we have been meeting for a year, and not once in that time have I ever shown the power to trap you into the projection. Only your mind can do such a thing. Your current state was caused entirely by what your doctors thought, the object in your brain. Galenus, how the hell do you know about that? Greaves, I'm dead? Rajmata, no. But both of you are in a torpor, from which you are unlikely to awaken. Certainly not before the Mechanites kill your men, make it to the lower deck, and slit your throat along with those of everyone else on board. And I know this because the Scarlet whispered it to the Maharaja, and he to me. Your future is written in the trees, I'm afraid. Galenus, no. No. This can't be right. There has to be something we can do. On the decks, the firefight continues, as the personnel are worn down and pushed back. Rajmata, there is. Galenus, what? Tell me. Rajmata, I have told you of how KORAR is collapsing. How the strain has sucked out the last vestiges of the Maharaja's energy, sapped into nothing after almost 1,000 years. Galenus, I thought you were supposed to be the eternal city. Rajmata, a lie. The astral projection was never meant to be an afterlife. It was only a matter of time. And you accelerated our time. Greaves, get to the point. Rajmata, the Maharaja is dead. KORAR is dying. But were it that the Scarlet could select a new host, not only would the Diva survive, but you witnessed the power of the Blackster when he had his god's favor. Turning the tide of this battle would be trivial. Galenus, you told me humans would be destroyed if we tried to commune with the Scarlet. Rajmata, most. But I have been watching you, Grevsgirus. The Scarlet has told me your people, your foundation, are sliding towards a war none of you can prevent. You are a soldier, a warrior king. You are strong. You wish to protect your people. Greaves, what are you talking about? Rajmata, strike a new covenant. Become our Maharaja, our king in slumber. And destroy your enemies. Galenus, this is insane. This is completely insane. We're not going to. Greaves, I'll do it. Galenus turns to Greaves. Galenus, what? Greaves, whatever this is. Accept the Scarlet. Just give me the power to stop this. Galenus, Lucian, are you out of your mind? Greaves, I said I'd do anything, kid. Galenus, we'll find another way. You saw the reports. We can't let the Diva return to power. This is just one battle. Greaves, no. No, she's not talking about just this. Rajmata, no. Galenus, what are you two talking about? Greaves, there's a storm coming. Pandora. Something bigger than the Mechanites, than any of us. The Foundation needs to survive. The vision crackles and sags, like film put to a match. Rajmata, we are out of time. She claps her hands, and the vision melts away. The group is standing in the antechamber of the citadel, not in KORAR, but in the ruined throne room in MAMJUL. Behind the throne, in front of the epicenter of the massive floor carving that spreads across the building. The Rajmata claps her hands again, and the wooden floor splits apart, curling back to reveal a hollow space. Inside lies the desiccated, mummified corpse of a man, skin stretched taut, A black headdress resting on his brow. A single red jewel is embedded into the headdress, shining like an ocean of blood. Rajmata, our Maharaja. My master. Take it, as he took the jewel from the roots of the tree so many centuries ago. Galenus, loose. Please. Don't do it. You don't know what you're unleashing. Greaves reaches in and grips the stone firmly, pulling. It resists, but then gives way, tearing out of the Maharaja's headdress, leaving a gaping hole. As he watches, the Maharaja's body falls in on itself, drying even further, turning to dust, fading. The stone whispers to him, promises of salvation, of divination, of victory against the enemy. Rajmata, now place the stone where it belongs. The far wall contains the engraving of the tree of life, of the diva and the humans dancing around it, of the scarlet watching over them. Greaves walks over, as if in a trance, and raises the stone. The wall falls away, peeling back and receding, splintering into nothing, revealing its secret. Behind the space lies an infinite scarlet ocean, a miasma of shifting and spiraling redness, stretching far into a horizon that cannot possibly exist. It speaks with the voice of 100,000 souls sacrificed in its name, as a great and terrible idea. A god. The scarlet, what are you prepared to sacrifice? Greaves, slight pause everything. It does not respond, it does not need to. The red beckons forth, and I step forward, across the threshold, into everything. It is around me, in me. The primal knowledge of what was before and what will be, the natural law written millions of years before any life existed. It is infinitely complex, and at once deeply simple. I see everything. The precipice we are on, and the brink we are falling towards. Our universe, severed from the others, utterly alone. I see Aram in his throne room in Amoni Ram, augmented beyond any specter of humanity. His eyes glitter with foresight and fear. He sees what I do. He is terrified of it. I see the Blackster, sitting alone in a forgotten city on a forgotten island. A paper lies in front of him, and the weight of eras rests on his face. The power of something older than the universe itself courses through me. I reach out and touch. God. End log.